Here we go, Tuesday training. All right, we got Valerie live in the house today for Tuesday training. So fantastic. And welcome to the rest of you who are here. Beautiful if you're here live. Feel and I'm going to turn that off. That's so crazy that it does that when I stream live on YouTube. But we are streaming live on YouTube for those of you who are not here live and get to catch the replay. And if you are here live and you can be on camera with me so we can have a chat, I would love that. And if you can't be, that's okay too. You can always add your questions into the chat if you also cannot come off of mute, if you're in an environment that doesn't allow you to do that. Either way, whether you're here live or on the replay, I'm so glad that you are. It's one of my fun times of the week where I get to meet with all of you fantastic practitioners and talk shop for an hour and hopefully provide some value. That is what I'm here to do each week, is to serve you in whatever it is that you're up to in the world. If you're a movement or a manual practitioner, that's great. I got something for you, and I'm sure you've got some questions as you're navigating some tricky client work, which is what we're all here to do. If you've not been here before and you're like, who are you? I'm Gina Schatz. I'm the developer of the Schatz method. I'm hosting you each week for Practitioner Tuesday training. And I've been in the industry working clinically for 30 years and training practitioners for the last 10 in a methodology that alleviates pain by getting to the source. So that is really where I lead from when I'm training or even just teaching anatomy, is rather than running around the room, running around the client, running around ourselves to put out the flames of every symptom that pops up, a better way of working that's much easier on you and on your client and gains better yields, better results, is if we get to the source, like what is causing that symptom. And that's it's pretty straightforward, but it does take a little bit of training, which again is why we're here each week, to get closer to the gold as we go. And I would say that what you really need to be able to solve those problems efficiently and easily is steep knowledge of anatomy, steep understanding of function and how the body moves when it is moving. And that's true whether you are a movement practitioner or a manual practitioner, because the way we develop pain in the body is either by the way we move or by what we're not moving. So there's movement involved, even when you are a manual practitioner. So we get to know movement. And then you get to have a real strong ability to strategically think your way through what all that anatomy means and what the symptoms are telling you. And then, of course, have the skill set to apply what you do and resolve it. And that can be done manually and through movement, and both, either or in both, for sure. So that's really the crux of it. That's the recipe. That's all I got. No, just kidding. There's so much more to talk about, because there is that steep knowledge of anatomy that we get to know, and the understanding of function. And also each tool does something slightly different too. So there, I will stress again, as you guys have heard me say week after week, there is no magic tool in the box that if you just knew this one tool, then you'd have all your answers. The answers come from within you. The answers come from within your ability to think through what's being presented. And the reason I say that is because every person who comes to you is unique in their history. And we all have the same shoulder girdle, like we all come with the same clean slate, if you will. We're all designed in the same way. And I've had some folks say, well, yeah, but what about, okay, so generally, widely speaking, we all come with the same parts. We're all designed in the same way. And I really mean that, because as I was trademarking the method, I don't just call what I do a method. I trademarked it. I had to list reasons why it's distinctively different from other work that's out there in our industry and in the field. And one of the real tricks to trademarking a method of body work is that, as the lawyers even stated, we all come with the same parts. We all have the same legs, leg bones, hip joints, etc. So to be able to describe something that's distinctively different and prove it is, sort of a hurdle, which I'm happy that we got to climb. So we're over the hurdle. And so for those of us who are using the Schatz method, it is unique and different. And so it's from that context that I say we all come with the same parts. So when we think that it's just a magic tool that we're missing, that's not really true, because every person who's got the same body parts has had a different history with their body parts. Their body has been exposed to different injuries or traumas or movement or lack of movement in their lifetime. And so all of that compiles itself into this beautiful story. And so I like to share with my clients that I'm, as I hear their history and what they're presenting with, it's like a treasure map, right? So like, I know where the gold is. The gold is getting them back to optimal alignment and optimal function, but I get to follow the trail of where their body's been up until the point when they came to me for treatment. So it's not that there's one specific tool that's going to wipe out all of that on the treasure map. The treasure map is part of the skill that we bring to the table to resolve the problem, because we follow the treasure map, and every juncture where the body had something to say or had an experience is intel for us on what the body is trying to share with us without full language. Like our mouth has language, but our musculoskeletal system does not. It only has sensations. So we get to interpret what those symptoms are, what the sensations are, and what the impact means to the body. And that's something that we know about our client's body that our clients don't know. So they know what they're feeling, and we know what the implication is for whatever the injury is, meaning we know how muscles respond to impact. We know what muscles do what joint action. So if there was a particular action that the body was in, a particular joint action that the body was in at the time of impact, that tells us a whole lot about which muscles need to be addressed and which ones might not be working, because we know what functional anatomy is and we know how the muscles are supposed to work. So it all comes together, and we want to bring all of that information and the ability to think through the answer, which is way more valuable than any one particular tool. And I'm not throwing shade on tools. I teach tools too, because some tools are great. Like in order to hang a picture on the wall, I can't just think about where I want it to be. I've got to actually have a hammer and nail to do it. So we do need tools. My emphasis here is that the tool is not going to bypass your ability to think through strategic problem solving and troubleshooting. I was going to blend those two phrases together. So our problem solving is ours to have, right? And that's just an inside job. And so the way I train that is much to the delight and stress, I'm sure, of my trainers. I don't know, Valerie, you can maybe speak to this, is that I don't give answers. I teach you how to think through. Valerie, are you sure you're talking, but you're muted? So let's hear, if you'd be willing, tell us what you just said on mute.
Oh, I was wholeheartedly agreeing, but that's why I'm here, is to learn to think the way they do, and some other spectacular minds I know do. And then I can be a more valuable team member at work and help more people.
Exactly. So yes, it's not always the easy path for us to learn strategic thinking, but I think it's the most necessary. So yes, I love that you're a full yes, Valerie, you have been from the beginning, which I love. And we do get to think it through. We get to learn how, and sometimes it's a little uncomfortable, but it's worth it. It's totally worth it. So I think I don't think anybody here that joins us on Tuesday training is looking for an easy way out, but I think that there's times in our career path where we get tired or confused, or our confidence lulls, or we might even be facing burnout and we just want it to be easy. And so if that's the space that you're in, you have all of my support and compassion, because we've all been there. I've definitely been there in my 30-year trek. The key is to not stay there very long and to give yourself an outlet, right? So grinding down to find an answer and signing up for one more weekend workshop and pushing yourself through it is not the same energy as learning strategic thinking. So you can force your way and grind your way and push your way through it and ignore your own beingness, and that won't get you results. There's not enough certificates on the wall that will make that worthwhile, I promise you. So we do get to be easy about it, and we get to be committed, right? Like you do get to bring your whole being, your whole brain to the table when you're learning strategic thinking. And as long as you're interested and committed to generating results for your people, then that's your why. And that's what makes it doable during some of the times where you're like, I just don't get it. And that's okay, because you will in time. If wherever you are right now is in an I just don't get it phase, that's okay. We get to learn more and you'll get there, I promise you. I didn't always get it either. So sometimes it's easy to think like, oh, well, Gina, you're 30 years in, you're totally confident. I mean, these are just things I've heard people say. You're totally confident, like, you know exactly how to solve all of it. Like, how do you know all of that? Because I put 30 years in. Like, I didn't come this way. There were moments in my career too, where I was just scratching my head and up at night trying to think through the problem. Like, how do I solve this? Like, I also did the overtraining thing, and I had a whole library of books, and I had been, CE'd up the wazoo, and there was still some times where I was like, I'm missing something. I just know I'm missing something. And then I figured out the method. And when I figured out the method, it wasn't like one day I woke up and before my coffee was done, I didn't even drink coffee at the time, but it's not like, before breakfast was over, I was all of a sudden the light switch went on and it was easy. No, even when I was developing my method, I was still developing. It's like putting the ingredients together to make a recipe. You don't go to the kitchen and poof, your dinner's on the table. You go to the kitchen, you work it out. Like you're like looking for ingredients that you don't have, or putting too much spice in and then trying to balance that out a little bit because that's not the flavor you were going for. It's the same thing as you're developing, a solution. And so I definitely had my development, time in the ring, if you will, along the way. And here's the key. We talk about this a lot in my mastery program. The messaging and how we communicate what it is that we do after we've practiced it enough to know what we do and to have results because we learned what we got to learn, practiced what we got to practice, and then have results to prove that we know what we're up to. When we message exactly that, what's in our lane, we do sound like we're confident and the authority, because we are, because that's the lane I'm in. If you ask me about another branch of body work that I maybe only took a weekend course in, but never really implemented, like some of my trainers are very well versed in lymphatic drainage. I love lymphatic drainage. I love what it does for people. I love the benefit. I love the post-surgical approach. I love all of it. It's amazing. I trained in it. I don't do it. So if you ask me something specific and detailed about lymphatic drainage or a particular client case post-surgery and what is needed for them relative to lymphatic drainage, I wouldn't sound like I knew what I'm talking about, because I don't. So it's easy to say like, oh, that person knows more than me. They just know what they know. And so my invitation for all of us is to pick your lane. If you're interested in really creating results and you are craving the feeling of confidence and the knowledge that when someone approaches you, you have a solution for them, then diversifying is not the answer. You can integrate. I also integrate movement and manual as an example. But diversifying and trying to be all the things and the expert in all of them makes it really difficult to be clear on any one of them. So as I've gotten feedback that I sound really confident and I know that I can solve problems. I feel confident. I do feel like, bring me your musculoskeletal problems. I got you. And sometimes I get to workshop it out a little bit. It's not like one session and the magic wand gets waved, but I'm not hesitant at all about musculoskeletal issues, but I would be about lymphatic drainage issues because that's not my lane. So again, just be really thoughtful. It's like the thing that we keep hearing about on social media. You're seeing highlight reels. You're not seeing what's really behind what makes that practitioner sound or look confident or be able to solve problems. They don't have something necessarily that you don't have. They've just been at it longer and they've been focused. So focus. So that's it. So that's what we're here for. Okay. So I wanted to continue on a little bit of our conversation last week, which was on joint movement. I love joint movement. It tells us a whole lot about where to work, where to focus, where the symptoms might be coming from, what we might need to know more about anatomy-wise. And so I always find this topic to be super valuable and eye-opening to both manual and movement practitioners. So that's what was on my agenda for today to talk about. And before I dive into the details and nitty-gritty about that, do you guys have any questions? Valerie, did you come with any questions? Is anything on your mind or any particular topic that you want us to make sure we highlight today while you're here? You're muted. You're muted, and I want to hear what you have to say.
No, just trying to don't know. I'm just working on getting through the new set of, I call it homework. You call it something else. I can't remember what you call it.
Training.
Training. Okay. Yeah. Coursework, homework. It all blends into work, and I'm enjoying it. And I've been surprised that I know a little more than I was giving myself credit for.
Yeah.
And yeah, I love your blue tape, by the way.
I know.
That is, especially for video work when you can't really feel the landmarks, and yeah, my eyes are going crazy because blue light. No, I'm plugging along and enjoying it.
Oh, I'm so glad. Yay, good. I'm so glad you're enjoying it. It gets to be fun. Do you mind if I ask you a couple questions, Valerie, on what you shared?
Sure. Go ahead.
Okay. All right, I love it. So first question, and Jill's going to join us here too. So first question is, well, first I want to acknowledge you, actually. I want to acknowledge you that you said you know more than you think you do. Yes, I'm so glad.
Well, I didn't say a ton. I said, some. I'm not a yogi, so that kind of throws me. I have to really look at these itty bitty pictures.
Yeah, your worksheet, right. Well, you do have yogis in your pod, so that's something that you can always lean into. They're going to need some questions from you about bony landmarks here soon too. So it goes both ways. So you're bringing up a really good point, Valerie. Like I've said this from the beginning, and I really mean it. None of us needs to be both a manual and a movement practitioner. That's not the solution. So if you're a massage therapist right now, not creating results, and you think you need to go be a yoga teacher or vice versa, I pause. That's not true. But we do, both camps have different information and different viewpoints on the same topic. And that's really valuable. So we get to, as manual practitioners, learn movement, right? Because we're seeing the value in understanding joint actions and the muscles that make those movements happen, and whether the lever system is actually working. And as movement practitioners, most of them do not have the same anatomy that massage therapists have. So they know how to move, but they don't know what parts are doing the moving. So that also leaves them feeling a little bit like, oh, I don't know if I know what I'm talking about. So we both get to support each other. And so Valerie, my invitation for you is, as you're working on the movement part, lean into the movement practitioners that are in your pod and have them support you, because it's going to go both ways, where they're going to want bony landmark refreshers or even first runs, some of them, as we move down the trail. Okay, so don't make it hard, make it easy. That's why you have a pod. Okay.
I know.
Okay, good. Just reminding you.
It's the time factor of connecting.
Well, use your chat, use your group chat, and just ask them, or post it in the Praetorium. Either way, you could do that at midnight, and someone can answer you in the morning. So don't worry about finding the time. You'll actually save yourself time if you get support.
True.
Okay. Yeah, you get to have support. Nobody gets to do it alone. We're interdependent by design, remember, so we get to all support each other, and you get to receive support. Okay, so a little housekeeping there on our mastery track. So thanks for those of you who are here. You're like, what are you talking about? I want a pod. I know, right? Pods are so fun. So congratulations, Valerie, for acknowledging that you know more than you gave yourself credit for. Most of us do, and it's good to be reminded. And the medium of movement that I like to train with is yoga, because it's head to toe. So there's, lots of movement in the body and lots of activities that are available to us, and they're all beautiful because we are designed to move. And even more so than Pilates, yoga gives us the ability to look head to toe at joint actions for an easier way of teaching. Let's put it that way. So we can actually hold a position and look at what's happening in the joint action without the body being in movement and trying to follow that really quickly, because dynamic action is much harder to trace. So that's why we use yoga as a medium of movement here in our academy. And Valerie, you mentioned the blue tape. Do you want to tell, for those who are here with us for the first time, or even watching on the replay who are not in mastery with us, do you want to talk about the blue tape?
Well, when we were going over movements and whether we were dealing with lateral rotation, medial rotation, specifically was where I found it very beneficial. Gina put some blue tape on her legs, because sometimes those rotations are very subtle, and especially like I work on clothed people, you don't always see that subtlety. So it gave a visual cue that was very cool.
So
Very
good. So glad. And what did you see that you, sorry?
No, go ahead. You're fine.
I thought I heard you say something.
I was just going to.
Yes, we're just going to say what? You were just going to say what? Say it. I want to hear
I was going to say something and it's gone. It was
okay. Okay. So can you share with us, Valerie, what did you see? So we do have blue tape. So I use painter's tape for those of you who are wondering, and you don't have to be in mastery for that. Like that's in one of our academy courses. It's in a couple of them, actually. I said mastery, Valerie, not you. So I was saying if you're not in mastery, you don't see it, but that's not true, or they're in the academy courses. So I put tape on Murph, which some of you who've worked with skeletons and other training and labs before, they'll have blue lines and red lines where muscle and tendon attachments are on bones or tendon and ligaments. And I also tape my own body so that if I'm moving, you can see the tape move. And it's important because in movement practices, your clients are all clothed. And Valerie, you mentioned something really important. In manual practices, as we're working the shots method as our manual practice, you're clothed. So there's nothing, everybody should have a full body massage as often as they possibly can. And that's undressed underneath a sheet. It's not the same type of work that we do in the method. We're resolving pain from the source. So we keep folks clothed because we get to move them and they get to move. And so how do you see some of these things with their clothes on? But to your point, Valerie, how do you see them when they're draped under a sheet? Right? Like they're not moving.
That's why I went to in clothes. It was easier.
Yes, right. And moving underneath the sheet is they're supine anyway. They're not really in full joint action. They're not opposing gravity, etc. So movement practices and the work that we do as manual practitioners inside this method, we absolutely get to have our clients still clothed. And sometimes we get to challenge our visual assessment skills. Now, obviously the key is to use your visual assessment skills and hone them so that you don't need to put tape on your clients. Although I just thought of this for the first time in my whole career. I don't think it would be a problem if you ask someone if you could put tape on them. But the point is we should build that skill to not need that. We should be able to see someone from across the room and be like, I know what's happening there. So we practice that more microscopically and up close in our training academy. So Valerie, what was one of the things, if you don't mind me putting you on the spot here and asking, what was one of the things that you learned specifically from one of the lessons with the tape and seeing joint action? What did you learn that clicked for you and you're like, oh, I get to do something with this information now?
Well, I knew the directions, but it was the subtlety. The medial was real easy for me to see, but it was such a slight degree of lateral, and the tape highlighted that. Where if I was closer and right over top of you, I may have detected that. But for training purposes, I thought that was brilliant.
Oh, good. Yeah. And are you talking about rotation in the hip or the shoulder, or both?
Hip.
In the hip.
Hip.
Okay,
yeah.
Awesome. So tell us then, I'm putting you on the spot here, my lady, because you are in the mastery track. So it's part of our strategic training. So, so once you got clarity visually on the difference between medial and lateral, which is great, we use the tape for that. What's the implication of knowing that there's medial and lateral rotation happening as a practitioner resolving a problem? Go ahead.
Well, I knew the difference. It was seeing the difference was what I was referring to. But to know what is going on, and if somebody's in that motion, why are they in that motion? Is it because of their biology and physiology, or is there dysfunction that needs corrected?
So what I'm hearing you say,
that's why I'm in the difference.
That's why what?
And part of why I'm here is to learn the difference.
To learn the difference about
when, right?
When do I intervene as a practitioner? That's what you're saying?
Yeah. Yes.
Yeah, exactly.
Like my doc is duck-footed, and I had him on my table, and I'm like, oh, and he said, don't even. He said, I've been that way my whole life. That's just how I am. I'm like, oh, and the practitioner in me wanted to go to work and try and fix that rotation in his hip because he's laterally rotated like crazy.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And so is he laterally rotated when he's standing as well?
I don't usually get to visualize as closely because we're on the move and we pass like ships in the night. So
you saw that when
I'll have to try and pay attention to that and see what I see.
Yeah. So you saw it when he was supine, when he was laying down.
Yes.
Okay, great. And so what do you know that means when he's laterally rotated? Now, supine is different than standing, of course, but what do you know that means relative to joint action?
Well, the rotation for one at the hip.
Yeah.
And my thought immediately went to too tight of hip muscles.
Which ones?
TFL. Not TF. Yeah. Tensor fascia latae. Possibly some of the glutes would be doing a pull to pull him back that way. Rectus. There's too many rectuses going on in there. Obturator internus possibly even tied in.
Okay, so this is beautiful, Valerie. Nobody likes to be on a muscle hot seat, by the way. So I applaud and acknowledge your bravery, my friend. So thank you for that. And so here's the key. This is the takeaway I want us to all hear. We do get to recognize joint action. We get to see it even with one eye closed, right? Even with the client fully dressed, even from across the room, we get to know joint action. And I heard you, Valerie, you do know joint action. And then training our visual assessment skills to confirm what we're seeing to match it to what we know joint action to be is a separate step, right? Knowing joint action in a book, but being able to see it in someone's body is not the same. So we've got to see it in the bodies that we're working on for sure. And then what I heard you say is, it's important for me to know what joint action is going on because it's telling me where to look. And that's true. So if we have lateral rotation of the hip, let's see if Murph will cooperate here.
And his hamstring be tied up in that as well.
His what?
Especially the lateral hamstrings could be tighter.
Mm-hmm. So maybe. So this is where I'm going to go with us all next, Valerie, given your generosity in answering. So if we're talking about lateral rotation of the hip, for those of us who are here listening, don't worry about Murph's other leg. The guy's a mess. He's the sweetest guy on the planet, and he's a mess. If we're talking about lateral rotation, we're looking here at this joint right here. Lateral rotation of the hip happens here. It doesn't happen down in the feet, which Murph's feet are never on. So as we heard you say, Valerie, which is there's nothing to be corrected in what you said. When we're observing and using visual assessment on joint actions, we look at other parts of the body to give us intel on what's happening at the joint where the action is. So when we see someone's toes turned out at 10 and 2 o'clock, we might think that the rotation is happening somewhere down near what we're seeing, kind of like that when we mistakenly think that the symptom and the pain are in the same place. The symptom of the pain and the source of the pain are in the same place. They're rarely in the same place. So when we see someone's toes turned out at 10 and 2 o'clock, we might think the rotation is happening anywhere here in the lower extremity. It's absolutely not. There is no rotation like that in the knee joint or in the ankle. The rotation happens here in the hip joint, or it doesn't. And so when it doesn't happen, or when it's happening in excess, we know that even though the toes are giving us that indication, we get to look here around this hip joint. That's number one for joint action. And then the second thing is, what muscles do that joint action? So now that I've identified that it's lateral rotation of the hip, now I get to know what muscles do the joint action. Because if I'm looking for the problem and to resolve the problem, and I know that it's because there's an excessive amount of lateral rotation or not enough lateral rotation, which tells me there's an imbalance in the lever system. Not enough or too much of a joint action is an imbalance in the lever system. That's straight up anatomy and how we're designed. And the function of how our design moves is lever system. If there's too much or not enough of a particular joint action at that joint, not down at the toes, but at that joint for lateral rotation, then it tells me I get to look at the muscles that do that action. but I've got to know what muscles do the action. Otherwise, I could be massaging till the cows come home all the way. Hamstrings you mentioned, glutes you mentioned, TFL you mentioned. And the question then is, do any of those muscles do lateral rotation? Because what I heard you say, Valerie, and so many of us say it, so thank you for being our hot seater today. I appreciate it, because we've all said this and we're all like, sometimes we get like, I don't want to say anything. I don't want to have the wrong answer. I get it, you guys. And be willing to have the wrong answer so you can learn the right answer. But holding back for your fear of not having the right answer is just holding back. It's holding you back. It's holding back your success. It's holding back your ability to serve your clients, which is why you're here trying to learn, right? So be willing to have the answer wrong and be open to learning the right answer, and then connect with someone that you know will help you. So don't go it alone and then continue to hide and hold back. So for those of us who are using this lateral rotation of the hip as an example, what I heard you say, Valerie, which so many of us say, is I know that some things are tight. So step one, I want us to know that something being tight really means an imbalance in the lever system, because you want to look at both sides of the lever, not just the muscles that are contracting, but also the muscles that aren't contracting.
Right.
Right. And so we get to know that that's the anatomy and the functional anatomy that we started our talk about today. Then the next step is, once you recognize that the lever system is imbalanced, you've got to know what muscles do that action. You got to know what muscles do the action. Otherwise, how can you balance the lever system? And that is where both manual and movement practitioners typically have big gaps. And I was one of them, by the way. So I am not throwing shade here whatsoever.
That's why I'm here.
Yeah, exactly, Valerie, exactly. And so we're just inviting everybody in this conversation who's not in the mastery track to understand that we're all in it together. We've all got so many similarities. We're more alike than we are different when it comes to learning the anatomy and functional anatomy. And I hear it a lot. So I'm sharing that with you to let you guys know, like, you're not alone. You're not the only one thinking it or fearing it or what have you. We've all been there. And same with me. And here's how it rolls out. As a massage therapist, yes, we learn all the muscles, all the origins, all the insertions. Absolutely. And we do learn the actions of them on paper.
Yeah.
On paper. And if we don't implement what we know, we don't have it to work with. We don't build our skill by knowing something. We build our skill by applying it. It's so important. This is the difference in all practitioners, and definitely in our mastery group, where those of us who soar are implementing, even if they're not sure they know what they're doing, they're courageously doing it anyway. And the ones who hold back because they want to get it right and they don't implement, slower to succeed. It's just the way it is. It's literally a definition I use all the time when I'm training, that the way to build the confidence we're all seeking, is through competence, which is knowledge and skill. It's not just book smarts. So wrapping this back, massage therapists do know the actions of all the muscles on paper. We learn it on paper, but we don't apply it. So now 10 years later, 10 months later, wherever we are in our career path, we're knowing that there's an imbalance in this lever system here and lateral rotation of the hip. And we're like, wait, what muscle does that again? I'm just going to massage the whole area, right? Boom, 60 minutes is over and you hope for the best. That's not the way to build confidence, and it's not the way to generate results. And when it comes to movement practitioners, they didn't learn all the muscles, but they know how things move. They know how to put the body in a position where the lever system is balanced, but they don't know what's causing it. They don't know what muscles are doing the work. So they can't ID where the problem is or ID how to solve it. So that's the loop that both manual and movement practitioners are in when it comes to identifying the muscles that do the joint action that you see is imbalanced in its lever system. So more on that to come for you, Valerie, by the way, because you got muscles and movement. And for, hey, Aileen, I'm glad you're here as well. So for those of us who still know that we need to learn our muscles, you're not alone, because I just outlined how both of us, both groups, manual and movement practitioners, get to learn muscles, right, in movement. And that's why I named the course that, Muscles and Movement, because how they move and what they're doing when they're moving, or what they're doing when they're not moving, or when something's imbalanced, is a whole wealth of information that I believe we all deserve to have while we were training originally. And again, our training was what it was, and we get to go on for more training. So in order for, so in order for us to, let's go back to your client, Val, I know he was your colleague, but in order for us to go back to how can I support that person, a couple things I heard you say. First off, and this is the messaging part, I love this part. First off, I heard your client say, I've been like that forever. This is just the way it is, or however he ended that. And a lot of, well, you know what, your mic cut out, Val. That's why I think I wasn't catching some of what you said. Say it again. I heard you speak and then it cut out.
He didn't want me to mess with it.
Didn't want you to mess with it.
I think other massage therapists have. I was just assessing, and he was more interested in upper body, but he's like, no, I'm totally no part of having that worked.
Yeah, so interesting, right? Like, oh my gosh, there's just a treasure trove here of where we could go with this conversation. And
but he did volunteer to be a guinea pig. So if we cover that part, and I can grab him.
For sure. Okay, great. So he's going to be one of your lab partners, which is great. So a couple things here, guys. We are talking joint action today, and I just want to address this because it comes up really frequently. It even came up in our training last week, actually in group training, and I think it came up 2 weeks ago in Tuesday training here. When our clients come with resistance, there's lots of reasons for that, and you get to really unpack that. And we do spend a whole lot of time talking about intakes and messaging and the like, because ultimately you're dealing with a human being. So you can know the anatomy and the functional anatomy and even how to address an imbalance that you see, and there's still a human there that's in the room with you. So we get to, to be real experts in our industry, we get to navigate the human in front of us and not just roughshod over them. So there's a couple things that come up for me when I hear that, and I'm just going to seed plant for today, and we can always dive into it even next week. But when our clients are in resistance, the top couple reasons that usually come up is because they don't know that what you are noticing is tied to their pain. So there's no benefit in you spending their time and them spending their money for you to tinker around because they don't think that it's going to gain any results. So in order for us to bridge that gap, we've got to know the functional anatomy and how to find the source of the problem to know for sure too that it's worth it. So what I'm hearing you say, Val, and your guy, for example, he wanted an upper body solution. So what we need to know is his upper body problem caused by whatever's imbalanced in the lower body? Are they tied together? Because if they're not, leave it alone. But if they are, then you get to enroll them in why you're going to work the lower body. You've got to know your anatomy, and you've got to know how to explain it, not the anatomy. Don't give anybody an anatomy lesson unless they're a practitioner, because they generally don't really want it. But we've got to be able to message to them the benefit of why we would be working in the lower body, because it's tied anatomically to the chief complaint that you have. We've got to know that. And so sometimes when I hear practitioners say, well, I thought it was this, but I wasn't really sure, and the client wanted that, so I did that. And then what was your result at the end of the session? It was kind of average. Right, nobody won. that was not successful. Nobody won in that situation. So we get to know and be like, look, I hear you. You want your shoulder, your elbow, your neck, your upper back, whatever. You want that pain to be resolved. And I'm here to do the same thing. I absolutely want that. And here's how it's tied to what I'm seeing over here, right? You get to be the eyes for them. They don't know the anatomy and how it's all connected. And you got to know, and then you got to explain it, and then you got to resolve it. The other thing that I hear when a client is in resistance is they have already been round robin for a while, and either they did spend a lot of time and a lot of money and they're exhausted by that, they've lost their hope, or a practitioner who didn't know how to resolve it tinkered, and the tinkering upset the balance that the body adopted through its compensatory patterns, because it will do that. The body's goal is to keep us alive and well. So it'll do that even if it's got to distort a few things. including musculoskeletally. So if we go in and we don't know how all the dots are connected, if we don't know the whole treasure map that we talked about, and we go in and we just pull out part of the path, we've disrupted the path. We've got to know where to leave them. We've got to know where to take them back to. We've got to know that we did take them back to their optimal design. We've got to know that. And that's the anatomy knowledge and the implementation and the practice. So, so it's either benefits or fear, or what's tight, Jill, could stem from weak glutes as well, not just tightness. Wait, I'm going to expand this so I can see your whole note. I have to leave for a client. This is great. Is there a replay? Oh, I'm so glad. Yes, Jill, always on the on our YouTube channel. The replays are there forever, so you can. Well, forever. How long is forever? The replays are there for you, so you're welcome to come back later and watch the end of it. And
Oh,
yes,
okay, thank you.
yes, of course, my pleasure. And I love what you're saying here, Jill, that weak glutes and tightness, sometimes we misunderstand that. So we haven't had this specific lesson yet, Valerie, in mastery. And for some of you who are in the academy, you may have already heard this in a course or two, but there are several different types of tightness, and only one of them is actually contractile tightness, which is where we get to, quote, release things. So I would love to abolish a few phrases in the practitioner world. One of them is stretching, which I know you guys have all heard me say, and the other one is tightness, because it doesn't mean anything. It's so varied in its meaning functionally that we actually do ourselves a disservice to say that things are tight, because weak muscles grip for tightness, tight muscles, contractile muscles can also feel tight. There's lots of different qualities of tightness. So I love that you brought that up, Jill. We get to know the types of tightness, and that's, again, a steep knowledge in our anatomy and our functional anatomy. And then what do we do about it? So we're here for the ride, because we're learning how to navigate the body, which is an endless topic. So just wrapping up the thought thread that I had on messaging to clients who are resistant, we want to be really thoughtful when folks come with resistance, that there's a lot of disappointment and even pain and loss of hope when folks are resistant. It's not just because they like being curmudgeon-y. And so I want to invite all of us as practitioners, if we see all of our clients as difficult and resistance, and we're just like rolling our eyes again, I see a lot of threads on social media about that, like, you know, these clients, blah, blah, blah. I'm just going to ask y'all to just pause, because what comes up for me with that is that the practitioners are either posturing because they don't actually know what to do. So it's easy to put it off on the client's resistance than to actually struggle to figure out an answer and do what it takes to learn what you get to learn, to be really freaking excellent at what you do. Stop putting it off on your clients. That's laziness, and it makes me mad. And the other is that we're not willing to do the work, and we're not willing to be compassionate to the person in front of us and what they came with. And so resistance isn't really resistance. And if you like rolling your eyes at people and being in resistance, I think it's because you've also lost your hope that you can find the answers. And so you get to take a time out. If that means take a vacation or find inspiration somewhere, please do that, because clients don't schedule an appointment with you because they don't want a resolution. Universally, nobody's wasting their own time and money. We can procrastinate and waste our time. We can hold ourselves back and waste our time. But our efforts when we schedule for somebody else's intervention is because we're ready and willing to take action on that. So just keep that in mind when your clients show up on your books, that they're not in resistance and they're eye rolling and you eye rolling in response is getting you, both of you, nowhere. So there's my PSA for today. On that, we just get to know a little better and be a little better and open our big giant hearts. I think, you know, in the battle between the mind and the heart, when our mind is struggling with our own confidence, or our mind doesn't have enough information to be able to problem solve, or we don't have training on what to do with this wealth of information that we've amassed because we don't know how to strategically think, then our mind energy is bigger than our heart energy. And it's one of the ways that we take ourselves out of the game working with clients and seem cold or distant or uncaring, because we're actually nervous and in our own brain instead of coming prepared so that our hearts can be open and we can be patient and calm and recognize that the person in front of us has a nervous system that's overactive, especially if they're walking around with unresolved pain. So one of the reasons why clients might be in resistance is because they don't know the benefits of why you want to tinker in an area, or they've been tinkered with and it left them, worse for the wear. And so we get to be better, especially if we do know for sure that it's tied. The other thing I'll offer you is that sometimes when a client comes in with a specific problem, I've seen practitioners do this, and it's right along the lines of what we already been talking about. I've seen a client come in with a particular issue. I haven't seen it. Let me be super clear. In training, when I've asked practitioners to bring me a case study and walk me through exactly what the client came with and what they did, etc., what I've noticed is that the practitioner didn't actually know how to solve the problem that the client came with. So it's easy for the practitioner to pick on something else that they see that's unrelated, like the way a client's sitting or their resistance or their toes turning out, etc. If it's not actually tied to what the problem is, it's easy. It's like a deflection, if you will. So if you're doing that, just hand on your heart, offer yourself some patience and some forgiveness, and then ask yourself what's underneath that. Is it your lack of confidence or your lack of training, or do you need a break? Because we don't want to deflect and make our clients wrong because we can't solve the problem. We don't want to do that anymore. Okay, Valerie, you sent me a love note. A note on tightness is, I find if tightness is part of a restriction or imbalance where another segment is inhibited. I find if tightness is part of restriction or imbalance where another segment is inhibited. Say that. Can you come off mute, Valerie? Can you share that with us?
That's more where it needs treated. Like you were saying, not all tightness, it has different reasons for being tight, but where it would need address, that would be an issue that I would say that's an indication to treat. And before I lost that thought, I wanted to write it down.
Yeah, good. I'm glad you captured it. I know I do the same thing sometimes when I'm talking. I'm like, wait, three ideas just came up in my mind. That's because we're so inspired by the topic we're on. I totally get it. Yes. There have been, just FYI, for those of you who are here, if you're watching on the replay, we have talked tightness before on Tuesday training. So you can go back in the YouTube channel and you can find a training on that. Valerie, I don't think you need to do that because it's coming up for you in an organized path. So don't you worry about that. But what you said today, just now, was really valuable. When we notice that something in the body is off, something's tight, or a trigger point has formed, or a referral pattern is present, or there's numbness or tingling, or there's inflammation somewhere, or whatever we're noticing that's coming up, yes, we can identify what it is. That's inflammation, that's a trigger point, that's a referral pattern, etc. Bravo, good for you, good for us. And that's not where we stop. Because the question always next needs to be, why is that happening? Right? So I would say the same thing about trigger points. I love trigger points. It's one of my most expensive and favored textbooks of all time. It really created such awareness for me before I was the developer of this method. As I was working through referral patterns, like, I love trigger points and I love Travell's book. I really mean that sincerely. And once I got into my own method, I started asking myself, but why is the trigger point forming in the first place? Right? It's all fine and dandy to know how to deactivate a trigger point, and you probably should. If you like doing that, you should know where they are and have skill set and tools to do that. And if we stop there, we haven't really served solving the problem at the source. The trigger point itself is not the source of the problem. The inflammation is not the source of the problem. The tightness in the muscle is not the source of the problem. The weakness in the muscle is not the source of the problem. Something in the function has gone off that led to any of those already mentioned. And that's where we get to really solve the problem. What's functionally going on that's perpetuating the weakness or activating or creating a trigger point? What's functionally going on that's making all of that happen? Don't just spend your time releasing muscles. And if you're a personal trainer or somebody who does strength conditioning for movement, Don't just spend your time targeting weak muscles.
Down.
Find out what's causing it. Or deactivating trigger points. You can deactivate trigger points forever and you'll feel like you worked your tail off and earned it. And your clients will feel like they endured it and earned the release. And y'all will feel great until whatever functionally created the trigger point in the first place is revisited, which could be walking back to their car after your session. And then they're back on your calendar for the following week and you're rinsing and repeating. I recognize that there are some business coaches out there that really stress how important it is to have regular scheduled appointments with your clients. Book them early, book them regularly, every Monday at 10. Do you want me to reserve this spot for you, etc. And I get it. And of course, if you're a service provider, your service calendar should be full. If you're providing service and earning your living doing that, you should be earning living doing what you do. The distinction that I have is if you know that your client, let me make it self-referential so it doesn't sound like I'm accusing anybody. When I knew that my client who had a regular Tuesday session scheduled ahead of time, when I knew that they came back for the third week in a row with the exact same symptoms that I alleviated, when they left, they didn't have those symptoms. But when they returned to me, they had them again. I knew I was not doing them a service. It felt like rinse and repeat. Like none of us, there's not a life sentence that says you have to be in pain forever once you reach a certain age or once you've had a certain injury or once you've had a certain surgery. That's not true at all. So if we think then that giving someone who's got this chronic problem of pain in their left hip, if we think that we're doing them a service by reserving Tuesdays at 10 for them every week and letting them feel good for 4 or 5 days after they see us, but needing to get back to us the following week, I did not think that that was an honest way to earn my living, because it meant that I was actually complicit to their chronic pain, because I was allowing it to return every week. And that felt irresponsible to me. So I needed to find a solution to get rid of that same pain. Now, here's the key, guys. That doesn't mean then that you won't still have that client come every Tuesday at 10. It means that every week it'll be a new playground, that you'll be doing different things with them. Maybe they will actually be pain-free and deserving of a relaxation massage or some other type of relaxation movement, or targeting that one area of their body that they just can't seem to make improvement on because they're always working on the body part that hurts, right? Like you still get to have the regular client. It doesn't mean that you scrub them off your books just because you resolve the pain problem. That's so not the way it works. Okay, so let's see, a love note just came in. Aileen, I have a client that has osteoarthritis in the shoulder and they don't like me trying to help it. He's just leave it alone. So again, there's a couple of reasons why that might be happening. And osteoarthritis is a change. So there is a distinctive difference in the way they came versus the way their body is now. And osteoarthritis still requires movement, sometimes even more so, because the joints are different, which means the muscle articulations are different, and so they have to move. So I know you're driving and you're muted, and I don't know how you even typed that message, Aileen, so like kudos for that. But maybe next week come back and share openly, and we can even, if you want, if this is what you were asking, I didn't hear a question in there, but if you want some support on that particular client and messaging or getting to the solution, maybe the reason your client doesn't want you tinkering is because what you did last time didn't help, or what the client practitioner relationship was before they met you left them feeling worse for the wear, or maybe they're afraid because maybe since they've been your client, they got that diagnosis and now they think that something really horrible has happened, right? We talked about this at our last summit. Sometimes the diagnosis is not helpful. Sometimes it is, just for the clarity, and sometimes it's not, because it really freaks people out. And even with a diagnosis of osteoarthritis or spondy in their spine or anything else, they still have to move. Just the quality of their movement needs to change, and we need to be experts not trying. We need to be experts in those conditions in the body and in functional anatomy to reunite that body's design back to its functional design. We've got to be experts at that. And as long as we're bringing the body back to its design, there will be no pain, and you're safe to go. But you got to understand those pathologies to be able to do that safely. So there's no tinkering when you hear someone with a diagnosis. What I didn't say was, oh, dismiss all diagnoses, they don't really help. I didn't say that. I said sometimes they're not helpful to the person who received the diagnosis. And we need to know the pathology to be able to navigate it, because they get to be pain-free even with a diagnosis. There's a lot of people walking around with degeneration in their spine, even mild herniated discs, even spondy in their spine, who are asymptomatic, guys, asymptomatic. So we need to know how. We need to know how to get someone who is symptomatic with the same diagnosis back to a non-symptomatic state. That's a lot of training for us, but it's not a lifetime of training. It's just some in-depth training. And then you get to be really compassionate to their pain and their resistance, and knowledgeable and authority, not authoritative, but an authority. Like, I got you. I want you out of pain. Let's just go slow. And here's what we're going to do. And then you've got to know exactly what to do anatomically. Don't let your compassion write your treatment plan for you. Let your compassion speak to the person in front of you, and let everything you know about anatomy write your treatment plan for you. That's the difference. Okay. All right. And look, I ran us right up to the clock because I could talk forever to you guys. I love what you're navigating and the questions that you bring up. Just before we wrap up for today, are there any other pressing questions? Did I leave you guys with any open-ended questions that I can answer for you before we go for today? Anybody? Aileen's got a thumbs up. Great. Jill's not here. Yep, she left. She logged off. She's going to watch us on the replay. Jill, if you have a question when you watch the replay, put it in the comments. I will absolutely answer it. And Valerie, you're good for today. Awesome. All right. My lovelies, it was such a delight to spend an hour with you and talk shop with you. I literally could keep talking. I could keep going. I could keep going. So thank you for being here live and investing in you and in your time and in your skill set, which ultimately means you're investing in your clients. And that really lights me up, because everybody deserves to be pain-free in this world. So thank you for all of your time and commitment here, and for all the amazing work that you do. And I'll